Good morning. Thank you so much for coming to listen to me today. This is actually the first time I'm doing a talk remotely, so I'm a bit more nervous than usually. I hope it'll go all right. It'll be weird not seeing you, but hopefully we get to chat a bit afterwards. So if we were meeting in person today and not remotely, this is probably how any one-on-one conversation would start. It's like, hi, how are you? Good, and you? It's almost a reflex, isn't it? Just, I don't know, maybe think back how often you've recently had exactly this conversation with a friend, apologies, with a friend or with a coworker or with a family member, and how often was good actually the truth of how you were really feeling. My name is Kai. I use they, them pronouns, and I want to just quickly share some facts about me. I have 2 dogs. They're very cute, I know. I have high blood pressure, which is sometimes related to those 2 dogs, but not always. I really love sushi, like really a lot. And I sometimes struggle with my mental health. And I think it shouldn't be weird to talk about any of these topics, but for some reason, mental health is still such a huge taboo, isn't it? So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So why me? Why am I here to talk to you about mental health? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. The only thing I'm an expert at when it comes to mental health is actually talking about it. So me and my mental health were kind of old buddies at this point. I've had my fair share of mental health experiences. I grew up with a dad who was likely very depressed and never got treatment for it. My partner was diagnosed with severe depression very shortly after we got together. And I myself have been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. I've always had ADHD, but somehow no one noticed, which is a mystery to me. And I was only diagnosed when I was in my late 20s. Now, technically, ADHD isn't a mental illness, but falls under the neurodivergent umbrella. However, many neurodivergent people also struggle with mental health and are affected by the same stigma that people with depression, bipolar, etc., are affected by as well. So over the years of dealing with all of that mental health stuff, I learned some things about how to deal with my own struggles as well as those of other people. And I'm going to share that today. So when I was 26, my dad passed away quite unexpectedly. And in the aftermath of that upheaval and grief, I suffered a burnout that was so severe I could barely move. And I mean that literally, like I couldn't get up off the sofa to make myself a cup of tea without feeling extremely exhausted. It was kind of a deep mental and physical exhaustion is the best way I can describe it. And we're not even talking days, weeks, or months here, but years. I actually had to stop working for about a year. I was lucky enough to be in a financial situation where I could afford to do that back then, but not many people are, and they have to keep working while trying to recover, which is very hard. When I finally did get back to work, I was looking for part-time jobs and easy jobs until I felt comfortable doing more again. Now, my dad dying wasn't the reason I burned out. It was simply the catalyst. After years or decades actually of undiagnosed ADHD, my own perfectionism, my upbringing, a lot of things played into it, but I was basically burning the candle at both ends, to stay with the fire metaphor here. If you play computer games at all, you might have a familiarity with this. I was using more energy than I had available. I metaphorically set myself on fire because there was nothing else left to burn for energy. So when my dad died, that was kind of the last straw, and I burnt out. I eventually recovered. I still have some of the symptoms to this day, but I would say I'm recovered. But while I was burnt out, my ADHD was actually more unchecked than ever. And something really strange happened. My filter malfunctioned. Now, what do I mean when I say filter? So if you don't have ADHD and a thought pops into your head, something keeps it from coming out immediately, your filter. People who have ADHD often have a very hard time with this. So we tend to blurt out everything that comes to our minds. Now, in like a normal, mentally healthy kind of situation, I am capable of filtering. It takes a lot of effort, but I can do it. But while I was burnt out, I was too exhausted to employ that filter. And so when someone would ask me how I was doing, like I mentioned at the very beginning, hi, how are you doing? I would just answer honestly. I would just blurt out, yeah, burnout, that died, not doing well. I just could not keep it inside. It was too much effort to pretend that I was fine. Now, the thing is, our society really isn't equipped for dealing with mental health stuff. I noticed that. Even just hearing about it can be extremely uncomfortable for many people. And those who are struggling then end up having to go to extreme lengths to hide it. And that uses up a lot of energy that they might not have, and that energy that they could use to recover instead. Now, I got all kinds of reactions when I started doing this. Some people were taken aback, probably most of them, but a surprising amount of them got over their initial discomfort and started listening to me and started asking questions, and actually even started talking to me. People were telling me about their own struggles with mental health, which it turns out a lot of people have, but we don't know about it because we don't talk about it. They shared their worries about loved ones, perhaps a parent with schizophrenia, a sister with ADHD, a friend with borderline personality disorder, a colleague with bipolar, or a child with OCD or something like that. And I heard so many different stories in those early days because my openness seemingly made it possible for other people to open up and ask for help, and actually sometimes even seek support. I know many people who, after talking to me, decided to get a diagnosis or go to therapy or just figure out what was going on with them. I also noticed how very little most people know about mental illnesses, things like depression, bipolar, anxiety, or neurodivergence, such as ADHD or autism. What is generally known about mental health is connected to a lot of misinformation, assumptions. It has stigma attached to it all. If you just look at these photos that I found when I was looking for free stock photos for the topic mental health, it's all very cliched. And I think that's primarily because we don't talk about it as a society. If it's a taboo topic, then how are we meant to learn anything about it? But me being honest and open was apparently helping. So eventually I thought, I want to do more than just tell my own story. So in 2016, I started a mental health awareness project called Tabula Rasa. It's based on the idea of the clean slate, the Tabula Rasa. The idea was to remove the taboo around the topic of mental health and interview people about their mental health experiences, and then share those stories, those very personal stories, on the blog. And in due course, hopefully help erase the stigma that is connected to mental health and neurodivergence and create more awareness and more knowledge. Now, the project has admittedly been a bit on ice because I got busy with work. I was moving internationally twice, and ironically struggling with my own mental health. But throughout the last 5 years, 6 years, or whatever, since 2016, I seem to have become a person that people come to talk to about mental health. I get emails, people come up to me, people talk to me, people ask me how they can help their friends, and so on. And all of that was just because I was being open about my experiences. It kind of creates a safe space for others to share theirs. Now, that's something that I can do because I have these experiences, but what if you're lucky enough to have never struggled with your mental health? First of all, I really envy you. That's awesome. Please enjoy it. But also, what can you do? And one of the ways you can contribute is by using inclusive language. So I don't know how often I've heard people downplaying mental health conditions or using them in judgmental ways. I once overheard someone say, oh, I was so burnt out last week. And that was like right when I was in the middle of my own burnout. If you were burned out last week, you would still be burned out this week, because burnout isn't cured in a week. It takes 3 to 5 years, in fact, to recover from burnout. Ask me how I know. So saying I was so burned out last week is cannot factually be correct, right? So what can you say instead? You can say I was so exhausted last week, much more than usual. That's great because it doesn't downplay burnout. And it also allows you to communicate how you're feeling and actually being taken seriously about it. Exhaustion isn't fun, and it's important to be able to talk about this as well. It doesn't have to be burnout to be legit, you know. Similarly, instead of crazy, you can use irrational or unpredictable. Or instead of saying I'm so OCD, you can say I like it when things are organized. I think it's really important to distinguish a diagnosis from a characteristic or symptom that can be connected to a diagnosis. So, for example, you can really like order without having OCD. And not everyone who has difficulty concentrating has ADHD. And there's a difference between having a depressing day and being depressed. Just yesterday, actually, I saw a comment on Facebook that said, I literally go into depression without the sun for a few days. But that's not how clinical depression works. What this person was trying to say, I think, is that they get a bit sad and down when they don't see the sun for a few days, which is an entirely different story. I also think it's important that we never use mental health conditions as a pejorative. What do I mean by that? So just like we know now not to say that's so gay as a negative, we should also make it a habit and a priority not to say someone is so bipolar just because they were upset with us and perhaps lost their temper. Using the right language helps destigmatize mental health and allows people to talk about these experiences without worrying about feeling judged or their struggles being minimized. And after that, the next step is to explicitly make mental health a conversation topic, not just in private, but in workspaces as well, just like you're doing today, which I find really awesome, by the way. The good news is that I can tell that things really are beginning to change, especially compared to 2016 when I started Tabula Rasa. So there's more awareness now, definitely. Unfortunately, I think a part of that is probably because of the pandemic. After 2 years of this pandemic, I've noticed that it has become way more common to talk about mental health. Unfortunately, that's because more people are struggling. Similar to the personal tragedy that caused me to start talking about my mental health 12 years ago, we have experienced or are still experiencing an ongoing long-term collective trauma that has not only impacted our physical health, but also our mental health. The pandemic, the lockdowns, the loss, and the grief, all of that has turned into an emotional pressure cooker of sorts. And I think the lid has blown. People have become more aware of their mental health or lack thereof. Some have newly developed mental health issues, others have pre-existing symptoms get worse. There's a lot of sadness, frustration, despair, anxiety, you name it. We're going through basically the whole gamut of human emotion, and we're doing it publicly as well, thanks to social media. Unfortunately, most healthcare systems are not set up to help us with our mental health. So all 3 countries I've lived in so far, Austria, the UK, and now Germany, they struggle with providing adequate and timely mental health support. So instead, what happens is that we as a society and as a community have to step up. That's not fair, but it's unfortunately where we're at in most countries. Now, the question is, what can we do to make things better? Each of us is only just one person, right? So how do we make things better as individuals, as a society, in schools, in companies, and so on? So let's have a look at what we can do. But first, a quick warning. So a character on a TV show I watched recently said, you're not the only one going through your depression. And I'm really glad they tackled that topic because that is real. It's called depression fallout. I've actually experienced this when my partner was very depressed, and it can feel like you're also developing symptoms of depression, which can be really confusing because you're like, I'm the not depressed partner. What the hell is going on? This is obviously true from other mental health experiences as well. So my partner was definitely affected by my ADHD when it was really bad. It's also a term that was coined for partner relationships, but it can also affect roommates, family members, very good friends. I think anyone you're really in a close relationship with. I just mentioned this because I think it's helpful to be aware of it when you share a life with someone who is having a hard time right now and you're beginning to feel affected as well. It's normal, and you should definitely also take care of yourself and not ignore these symptoms, because even if you're not officially struggling with the same thing, those symptoms can be very debilitating. So what can you do if you or someone you're close to is struggling? First of all, my favorite, ask for help. Ask for help. I know it's really hard, but find someone you trust and just ask them to either help you research or just hold your hand as you're going through this and make you feel less alone. And on the other side of that coin, be that person for others as well. Offer to help. People have a hard time accepting help, but just be there and be there continuously and offer to help. Now, helping can obviously take all sorts of forms. When someone is in crisis or a life is in danger, please get a professional involved. That's very important, because you don't have the experience to deal with a mental health crisis. There are national helplines. I will share a few links with Seb afterwards that he can email to all of you all. These national helplines are usually available night and day, and they can recommend the best course of action if someone is in crisis. Now, a word of warning, not all emergency services are actually sufficiently trained for mental health emergencies. So in the mental health community, it is very well known that calling the police is an absolute last resort. They're often not well enough trained to deal with mental health stuff and can actually exacerbate situations and make things so much worse for the person who's in crisis. So just be aware of this as you're trying to find help. So what if someone is struggling, but it's not an emergency? First of all, ask them what you can do to help. I've become a huge fan of just asking, what do you need from me? Not just in mental health situations, but generally. I tend to be a person who jumps straight into solutions, but not everyone wants that. Learned that the hard way. So now I try to say, do you want me to find solutions or just be there for you to vent? Or do you want me to hug you or give you some space? Just ask what people need, listen to them, and respect their boundaries. Yeah, diagnosis is such a huge topic. Sometimes diagnosis helps, sometimes diagnosis is merely the gateway to accessing the medical care and medicine that you need. Other times, just knowing you probably have this is enough and you don't actually need an official diagnosis. That is obviously different for every single person and every single case. But if you want to get diagnosed, the way to go would be a psychiatrist. Sometimes GPs also feel comfortable diagnosing the more standard things, such as depression or anxiety. If you already have a suspicion of what's going on, you can also find a specialist. So for me, it was accidental, but I was diagnosed with ADHD by a psychiatrist who's actually an expert in adult ADHD. So that was really neat, because I got diagnosed so much faster than other people I know who went to psychiatrists who don't specialize in this topic. So yeah, if you know what's going on, try to figure out who's a specialist for that, perhaps. Another hugely broad topic is medication. Once diagnosed, your doctor might suggest medication. Sometimes, like I said, GPs diagnose depression, anxiety, and offer you medication as well. Don't refuse it out of principle. I know there's stigma attached to taking brain meds, but think of it as treating a chemical imbalance. If your gut was not in balance, you would also consider taking something or eating specific things to bring it back into balance. Why not give your brain the same courtesy, you know? My ADHD meds have actually, I mean, medication is not for everyone, and I get that, and I totally understand that. And there are sometimes also medical reasons for not taking medication for mental health. But my ADHD meds have absolutely saved me and my relationships. They've saved my sanity and the sanity of the people around me. It's also good to know that most mental health medication can take a while to figure out what works. So, for example, I know a few people who have taken a fair number of antidepressants before they found the right one that really works for them. On the other hand, I also know people who found the right one at the first moment. So personally, my ADHD meds worked fine for me from the get-go, but I wanted to try a non-stimulant medication first. I took Strattera for a month and vomited for a month every day. So that's also how I knew that those meds wouldn't work for me. It can be a rough road dealing with all the side effects, especially since you need to try meds for a while to figure out if they actually work or not. Do not despair, just hang in there, please. Sorry, that seems to be an issue. Yeah, consider therapy. I put a heart there because I love therapy. I think everyone should be in therapy. It's fantastic, regardless of mental health or not. It can be tricky accessing therapy and insurance. So if you can consider paying privately, I recommend that. Also, just like with medication, it can take a while to find the right therapist. Most of them offer free get-to-know sessions that you can suggest doing that, see if you click with someone. Plus, there are many different types of therapy and not all of them work for everyone. So for example, for me, talk therapy was fantastic. For my partner, it didn't do anything. Vice versa, my partner saw fast results with CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. I hated CBT, pardon my words, didn't do shit for me. Yeah. So find the right therapy, you can research that, and also find the right therapist. Speaking of research, you absolutely have to become your own advocate. I hate saying this. People who are struggling with chronic illness already know this part, but not to diss medical professionals, but they often don't know the small everyday things people struggle with. Meanwhile, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence online, and that can help you feel less alone and cope better. Even 11 years after my ADHD diagnosis, I'm still learning new things about ADHD symptoms on TikTok, of all places. So forums, TikTok, Twitter, those are all great places for getting support and information and meeting people who are struggling with the same thing and feeling less alone. Now, this is all stuff you can do individually, but just like the climate crisis, I tend to think that the mental health crisis shouldn't rest solely on the shoulders of individuals, which is why I'm really glad to see some companies are starting to think about how they can do their part. So what can companies do? I'm tracking back a bit to the inclusive language. Make it a company policy to not use stigmatizing language. Normalize calling people out on stigmatizing language, and also normalize taking it in good faith and not being offended by it. The good thing is you can all learn together. You can do workshops together, share reading materials. I don't know, you can create a Slack channel to discuss inclusive language. And the important part is do it on company time. Don't require people to do this in their spare time. Destigmatize mental health and neurodivergence. What I mean by this, simply create an environment where these are not seen as weaknesses or limitations, but rather as a chance to gain resilience and perspective. We're all individuals and we all bring different things to the table. And people who've experienced mental health struggles or neurodivergence bring a whole bunch of different things to the table that can be very, very helpful and good, even in a company environment. You should also provide individual accommodations, I think, for people, not just for people with mental health struggles or ADHD or autistic people, but people with learning disabilities, etc. Actually scratch that, individual accommodations for everyone, because again, we're all individuals and we all need different things. Now, this is, I think, an important one, although it's more of a US problem than a European problem. Don't penalize absences or reward for attendance, and normalize taking time off for mental health. I think it's far better if someone takes some days off here and there rather than not doing that. And then down the road, they need so much more time off to recuperate in one go. That is demoralizing for them, and also doesn't help the company much, does it? What you can also do is you can provide resources on where to find help and make those resources available easily so that people can access them just quickly without outing themselves. Now, this is a bold one, I think. Offer subsidies for therapy, no questions asked. Make those subsidies easy to access, and also give time off for therapy sessions and don't require people to make up the time. And I don't know, maybe that is, I'm thinking of a utopia here, but maybe one day we can even incentivize therapy and do it for everyone, not just people who are particularly struggling. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of therapy. And yeah, set up some resources that fall under well-being. For example, a quiet room can help a neurodivergent person avert overwhelm. It can help someone with anxiety by giving them a place to calm down. But it's also a nice thing for all employees, regardless of specific needs. For example, if someone's coming out of an infuriating meeting, maybe they just need to sit quietly and have some time to breathe and come back down to a normal level for them. There's also this thing that I call wellness, but don't make it shitty. Why am I calling it that? Because I once heard of a company offering yoga sessions, which is a nice touch, but they were offering it during everyone's lunch break. So don't make people choose between yoga and food just so their well-being doesn't cut into your company time. That's my biggest advice here. And then one thing that isn't always mentioned, but I've noticed it can be a bit of a problem, is sober socializing. If your company does kind of social activities, make sure they're not all centered on alcohol. And this actually accommodates a bunch of different people with substance abuse problems, people who are pregnant, people who are not drinking because of religious motivations. And also alcohol functions as a depressant. So many people with mental health stuff going on tend to avoid it as well, or try to avoid it. Make it easier for them is what I'm saying. And then just I call it workplace flexibility. I know that sounds like, I mean, office, remote, hybrid, but it's more than letting people choose between office, remote, and hybrid. It's like true flexibility and on short notice. So for example, if someone's not feeling well in the morning, but they were meant to come in that day, but they feel like they can work, but they just really don't feel like leaving the house because it's too much and the overwhelm, make it easy and unbureaucratic for them to do just that and be like, hey, I'm going to work from home today. I'm available, but I can't come in. And then also make sure that people know that you're open to adjusting workload and responsibilities. Some people want to keep working while they're going through something and have that distraction. Others might need some more downtime to recuperate, because we're all different needs. We all have different needs, so we all need individual solutions. And then I would say, last but not least, I think this is last but not least, I don't know. This also goes into hiring. When I was recovering from burnout, I was looking for something less challenging and part-time, and I kept being rejected as overqualified because hiring managers assumed I would ditch them after half a year because I'd get bored. Rather than making these assumptions, consider that people might genuinely want an easy job for a while for their very own, very valid reasons that they might not want to share with you. So if you see talent who wants to work part-time or is applying for a job of a lower level, hire them anyway. You can always keep like an open offer for them to scale up later or to progress to a more challenging position without putting any pressure on them. Sometimes people just need some time, but that's not a good reason to reject applicants. Now, there are many more things you can incorporate into your company culture, and I'm seeing I'm actually running out of time. So I'm just going to say this. You can proactively foster a healthy environment for people struggling with their mental health, but also for everyone, by simply asking people what they need from you. People who are not doing well, people who are doing well, ask all of them now what they need and how you can make things better. And you can even do so anonymously. Okay, we're almost done here. So to round this out, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of us who are perhaps not struggling with anything in particular, but just, feeling a bit meh. First of all, that is so legit. There's a pandemic going on and it's been getting to all of us. I've asked around, people are experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, brain fog, anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure, social anxiety, even agoraphobia, without any connection to an actual diagnosis, just because things are hard right now. You don't have to have a diagnosis to legitimize the state of your mental health and do something about it. This isn't the mental health Olympics, and there are always things you can do before things get way worse, and things that don't involve doctors and medication, but simply some, let's call it mental health hygiene. A few years ago, doctors in Scotland started prescribing forest walks for mental health conditions. And I admitted a lot of us in the mental health community initially rolled our eyes, because going on a walk won't magically cure your depression, but it can help with the symptoms or when you're having a depressing day. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a walk in the woods. Just like find what works for you and then try to do more of that. And this is also especially important during a pandemic or any other particularly stressful time in your life. For example, for me, this works. I started wild swimming year-round in 2018, and it's really been keeping me sane. There's something about submerging myself in the ocean or a lake that really helps my brain go quiet and my anxiety melts away. Because of the cold water, it can also help with physical pain, which I find really practical. It also means I'm spending time with my partner and our dogs out in nature, which I find helpful as well. So yeah, okay, maybe wild swimming is a bit too extreme for most people. Though I can definitely recommend trying it, and I always try to evangelize people, I admit that. But I bet there's something you like to do that relaxes you and brings you calm and lets you find joy in the little things. And I don't know, maybe for you it's gardening or riding bikes or riding horses or mountain climbing or hiking. Or maybe it is that walk in the forest or just playing in a pile of leaves. Maybe it's kayaking or just sitting by the sea or a creek and listening to the water. Or maybe it's watching Bridgerton on Netflix or re-watching your favorite feel-good shows. Maybe it's swinging in a hammock with a good book or eating your favorite food, hanging out with your friends or family, pandemic permitting, I guess, or crafting or creating something and leaving your perfectionism at the door. And to get back to where all this started, maybe it's also a good idea to start talking openly about what you're going through, not just because it's good for us as a society, but because it could also help you personally feel better. And if you're struggling right now, please remember it does get easier, both dealing with mental health experiences and the talking about them. Thank you very much for listening. Next time someone asks you how you're doing, I don't know, perhaps consider giving a different answer and just see what happens.